Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive into the depths of a truly dark case. We're talking about Albert Fish.
hmm
You know, the boogeyman, the werewolf of Listeria, just his nicknames are enough to give you chills.
It's a fascinating case, really. I mean, Fish was active in the early 1900s, a time when we barely even understood criminal psychology.
Yeah, it's like looking back into this really murky past, right?
hmm
Trying to figure out what could possibly lead someone to do the things he did.
Exactly. And we've got a lot to dig through. We've got his Wikipedia page, some transcripts from the Casual Criminalist, and even a few other pieces, all to help us try and uncover, well, the making of a monster, I guess you could say.
And it's not just about him, is it? It's about the time he lived in. I mean, how much did the lack of knowledge, the lack of help for mental health issues back then contribute to, him going down this dark path?
Right, that's a big part of it. But to understand that, we got to start at the beginning. And well, his childhood, as we see in the Wikipedia article, wasn't exactly a walk in the park.
Oh, absolutely not. Abandoned to an orphanage, right? A place where violence was basically an everyday thing.
Yeah, he actually claimed he saw and experienced some really brutal stuff there. You can only imagine the impact that kind of environment would have on a young mind.
It's like planting a poison seed. It's almost like it warped his understanding of what pain and punishment really meant.
It's possible. And then you add in the self-harm. I mean, the Wikipedia article mentions him pushing needles into himself, almost like he was, I don't know, testing his limits with pain.
It's really disturbing. And that's even before he starts hurting others.
Self-harm is often, a way of coping with overwhelming emotions, pain, whatever it may be. But with Fish, it's almost like a foreshadowing of what's to come. The sadistic pleasure he'd later take in hurting others.
Makes you wonder, at what point does hurting yourself turn into wanting to hurt others? And how do you even begin to catch that, prevent that?
Tough questions. But we see things escalate when he's an adult. The Casual Criminalist transcript goes into his time frequenting those public baths, starting with just watching young boys undress. But it doesn't stop there, obviously.
It progresses to molestation.
Mm.
And that progression, that's a big red flag, right? It's like this steady descent into darkness where the line between right and wrong just vanishes.
Vanishes completely. And again, you have to wonder, were there signs that could have been picked up on, interventions that could have maybe changed his course?
It's easy to say that now, looking back,
Yeah,
but back then it was a different world.
absolutely. And then in 1890, he moves to New York City,
Right.
gets caught up in prostitution, sadomasochistic relationships. It's a grim picture.
A man consumed by his darker impulses, for sure. But the crazy thing is, he gets married in 1898 and has 6 kids. His own daughter called him a kind father. How is that even possible?
It really makes you question everything, doesn't it? Was that just an act, a mask to hide who he really was? Or was there a genuine part of him that could be a father, a husband? How do those two sides even exist in the same person?
A real head scratcher. But even within the marriage, there were these flashes of darkness, right? The Casual Criminalist transcript mentions some disturbing things, drinking his wife's urine, eating her feces.
That points to something way beyond what's considered normal, sexually speaking. It goes to show, even within a marriage, a disturbed mind will find ways to express its darkest desires.
And then his wife leaves him, takes the kids, takes everything in 1917. And it seems that's when things really spiral for him.
Abandonment like that can have a devastating effect, especially on someone with pre-existing mental issues. It's almost like her leaving ripped away his last shred of control.
And then the hallucinations, the delusions. He's seeing Jesus, angels, all commanding him to torture himself.
Yeah, it's all unraveling at this point, and I'm afraid this is just the beginning. It's like all this darkness that was simmering inside him finally boiled over. Around this time, Fish claimed to have killed a mentally disabled boy in Georgetown, I think it was. He specifically targeted those he thought wouldn't be missed, which is just, well, chilling.
Yeah, that's not just disturbing behavior anymore. It's straight up murder.
Yeah.
And he keeps choosing victims that can't really fight back.
And it gets worse. In 1924, he tries to kidnap this young girl, Beatrice Keel, on Staten Island. He even tried to hang around after, slept in the family's barn before they found him, and chased him off.
So he's not even hiding it anymore, really. He's actively trying to take kids.
It makes you think, how many other times did he almost get away with it? How many other close calls were there that we just don't know about?
It's a terrifying thought.
Hmm.
But then there's the case that really made him infamous. The one everyone remembers, the murder of Grace Budd in 1928.
Well,
A real nightmare for any parent.
yeah, the Grace Budd case, that's when things shifted. Not just for Fish, but for how the public saw him. This wasn't just some crime. It felt like pure evil.
And it starts with a simple classified ad. Grace's brother, Edward, he was only 18, was looking for work. And Fish, calling himself Frank Howard, answers the ad, says he's got a farm and needs help.
Classic deception, preying on a family's hope, you know? He created this whole persona to get to his real target, 10-year-old Grace.
And he goes and meets the family, but instead of giving Edward the job, he starts focusing on Grace. Makes up this story about a birthday party, even buys her a new dress, all to gain their trust so they'd let him take her.
The level of planning, it's scary. He knew exactly what he was doing, each step, carefully calculated. What must have been going through her parents' minds as they watched their little girl walk off with this stranger?
It's heartbreaking. Fish takes Grace to this abandoned house he'd already picked out, Wisteria Cottage, they called it, in Irvington, New York. And that's where he did unspeakable things.
The Casual Criminalist transcript talks about him having what he called his implements of hell, tools he brought with him. A butcher knife, a cleaver, a handsaw. Those aren't just weapons, they were meant to cause pain, a lot of it.
He strangles Grace, cuts her body apart, and then, in a confession that I'm sure shocked even the police, he admits to eating parts of her body over the next few days.
Cannibalism, you usually think of that in terms of survival or maybe some ancient ritual. But with Fish, it was about power, control. It's like he wanted to completely own his victim, even after death.
For 6 years, the case goes unsolved. Imagine the torment Grace's family went through, getting those cruel letters, the false leads. Then, in 1934, one letter changes everything.
It was the letter written by Fish himself describing Grace's murder. Graphic details, sick boasts, all meant to hurt her family even more.
The letter was signed Albert Fish, and it had details about the crime that only the killer would know. He even talked about the taste of her flesh. I mean, who does that?
It's almost like he couldn't help but brag, like he wanted the fame. And that's what got him caught, his need for attention.
The police managed to trace the envelope to him through some chauffeurs association. They show up at his boarding house, and he doesn't even deny it. Confesses to killing Grace, even admits he planned to kill her brother Edward too.
It makes you wonder, was it remorse? Or did he just want to be in control even as he was getting caught?
His trial in 1935, it was huge news. Fish pleads insanity. Claims God told him to kill children.
The insanity plea, that's always a tricky thing. In Fish's case, could someone who planned and committed such horrific acts really be insane?
Psychiatrists testified, talked about all his, fetishes. They called him a psychiatric phenomenon. Even his own kids had to testify, telling stories about his self-harm, the sadism. It really painted a disturbing picture of him.
Must have been incredibly hard for them to do that. Imagine having to face the fact that your own father was a monster.
His lawyers, they tried to argue that he was driven mad by his tough life. They even said maybe he got lead poisoning from his work as a painter.
That lead poisoning theory, it's interesting. Could be another factor in his mental state, but then again, can anything really excuse what he did?
The jury didn't think so. They found him sane and guilty. Sentenced to death, executed in 1936.
At least it put an end to his killing, but you have to wonder, could any of it have been prevented? Were there signs that were missed?
It said his last words were, "I don't even know why I'm here." Kind of chilling, considering all the pain he caused.
Haunting words. It's like he didn't even understand what he did, the magnitude of it, trapped in his own twisted world.
But even after he's convicted, he confesses to killing this 4-year-old boy, Billy Gaffney. Disappeared in 1927. Fish gave details about how he tortured and cannibalized him.
A confession after he's already been sentenced. Was it guilt or just another way to shock people, even as he was about to die?
He also claimed to have killed many more children, but only 3 were ever confirmed. Grace Budd, Billy Gaffney, and Francis McDonnell, an 8-year-old boy murdered in 1924. Some think he could be responsible for as many as 24 murders.
We'll probably never know the full truth. To think there could be other victims out there, it just adds to the tragedy.
This whole deep dive, it's been a journey into the darkest parts of humanity. It shows how evil can hide in plain sight, looking like something normal.
So what can we learn from all this? How do we stop something like this from happening again? How do we protect kids from predators?
Those are questions we'll keep exploring as we continue our deep dive into Albert Fish. It's the sheer volume of it, going through these sources, the things Fish did, not just the killing, but the torture, the mutilation, and then writing about it in these letters.
Yes.
Like the one he sent to Grace Budd's mother, just pure cruelty.
Yeah, those letters, they really give you a look inside his mind, don't they? I mean, the obsession with pain, both giving it and receiving it, all that self-harm, the needles, the paddle, that wasn't just about hurting himself. It points to a much deeper problem, a problem that eventually turned outward towards others.
And what gets me is how he could keep it all hidden. You know, he lived a normal life for years, jobs, family. How do you keep that kind of darkness bottled up like that?
It's almost like a reminder that evil can look just like anyone else. I mean, these guys can be charming, they can be likable. That's how they gain trust, how they avoid suspicion. It's a good reminder to always be aware, right? Look for those warning signs and encourage people to speak up if something feels wrong.
And then there's the whole thing about him targeting children.
Yeah.
That's just, I don't know, it's hard to even wrap your head around. What would drive someone to do that?
Pedophilia, it's a complicated thing, a really disturbing disorder. With Fish, it seems like it was tied up with his sadism, his need to control, to have power over someone weaker than him. Those kids, they weren't people to him. They were just things to use and throw away.
The Casual Criminalist transcript actually mentions this story, where Fish lured these two boys to his apartment. He was planning to torture them, eat them. Luckily, they managed to get away. They found his tools hidden under his mattress.
Imagine that. And that just shows for every victim we know about, there could be so many others, ones that got away, ones that we'll never know about. It's a good argument for being proactive, stopping these things before they happen.
So as we wrap up this whole deep dive, I keep coming back to this question. What can we learn from all this? How do we stop this kind of evil from happening again?
I think the biggest thing is awareness. We have to protect children, teach them about the dangers, make sure they feel safe talking about things if something seems wrong. It's about creating a world where guys like Fish can't operate so easily.
Right. And we can't forget about mental health. We can't say for sure that getting him help early on would have changed things, but we have to try, you know. Treating mental illness, recognizing those warning signs, it's got to be a priority if we want to stop these cycles of violence.
Absolutely. And, I think Fish's case also shows us that evil, it can be anywhere. It can look like anything. We have to be aware of the little things, the red flags, those hints of darkness that might be hiding underneath. That's how we protect people, how we stop this from happening again.
Well said. This whole deep dive, it's been a tough one. But if even one person out there hears this and starts thinking about child safety, about mental health, about recognizing the signs of danger, then maybe it was worth it.
Definitely. Knowing about these things, that's how we fight them. And by understanding the darkest parts of humanity, maybe we can stop them from happening again.
That's a good note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the mind of Albert Fish.
Yeah.
Let's all do our part to make sure the monsters out there are stopped and the innocent are kept safe.